Welcome. Today, I'm going to kind of take you on a journey that I've been taking my groups on recently. And I think that this is a really important part of our healing and the recovery process that we go through. And there comes a point in time where we have to stop and start recognizing that as a betrayed partner, that there are needs that you have. And I've been taking them through needs and how to identify it. Then we've been getting down and very specific with our needs and assigning a right to that need, meaning that I have my Bill of Rights, meaning I have a right to experience this in my life. And then we are then moving that into boundaries. And I know I've spoken about boundaries in the past, so you can refer back to some of the things that I've talked to regarding boundaries. But today I'm going to take you through what we've been working on the last few weeks in my group, which I think is taking a concept or two or three today and making it very applicable in your life. So I'm hoping that you will take some of these ideas and use them, and it'll help you in your own healing journey. Remember that when we first have discovery or disclosure, that we've got crisis that occurs. And the interesting thing about crisis is it can come and go. Even after we get through that initial crisis phase, we can still go back into it. And this crisis is typically associated with that sudden detachment or disconnection in a relationship. It's that attachment injury that occurs when we're in relationship as a betrayed partner with an addict partner. And while we do focus on stabilization and helping you get grounded and learning those skills and tools, there's another component to it that I think is very, very helpful. And that is that we've got to begin to look at your needs as a betrayed partner and why maybe those needs aren't getting met and how they're contributing to that repetitive feeling of I'm back in crisis again, I'm having another crisis again, I'm triggered again, I'm having these intense emotions. And so I love talking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs and just getting down to helping the women that I work with kind of understand exactly what needs are. I love this quote by Maslow. He says, if both physiological and the safety needs are fairly well gratified, then there will emerge love and affection and belongingness needs. And the whole cycle already described will repeat itself with this new center. So I love the fact that our safety needs have to be taken care of. And once they are, then we can focus on that emergence of love and affection, which is also a need. And then that cycle can repeat itself. And that's really the goal. As human beings, we come into life with really three basic needs that we need to have met. Of course, we talk about that we need food and water, which is sustenance. We have to have shelter. And the third need that is so important is connection, because connection and all those other things are what help us to survive. And of all of those three basic needs, we need those throughout our entire life. That need for connection with others never ever goes away. And so it's important not only when we come into the world as a baby, but even as we leave the world as an adult. So that's why connection with others is so important. And we all know that when we've gone through betrayal trauma, that connection is the part that becomes very threatened. And that's the one why it feels at times like we feel like we're almost going to die, or we feel like we can't go on when there's this disruption to this loving relationship that we've had. So let me give you some examples. We talk about these dependency needs. And again, they're based on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And so let me give you some examples of what adult emotional dependency needs would look like. So for example, when I'm angry and I tell someone how angry I am, I need them to validate what I'm feeling. They can either do that by supporting me, they could agree with me, or they just even acknowledge my anger. Let me be angry in this moment so they can hold space for me. That's a need we all have. Another example is when I'm sad and I express my sadness to others. Again, I need them to support me, empathize with me, soothe me. Those are ways that, right, somebody can be there and connect with me in that moment. Another one is even when I'm joyous and I'm happy and I express it. Likewise, I need somebody to be there to validate my happiness, to mirror it back at me, to cheer for me, to support me. So those are great examples of what we need in relationship. And again, whenever we've had the betrayal that we're working on healing from, all of that becomes so chaotic and so disorganized. So there's a way that we can, as recovering partners, kind of begin to identify and understand what we need within the relationship. Unfortunately, sometimes when we go to try to create connection when we're going through betrayal trauma, we may not do it in the healthiest of ways. But remember that as you're going through your healing journey, you're going to find that if you can gain this knowledge and use some of the tools I'm going to talk about today, that you're going to go in and the attempts that you're going to make again and again are going to begin to create healthier, safer, more grounded connection. When we talk about relationship needs, and that's what we're going to talk about right now, remember, a need is something that is, by most standards, it's a non-negotiable. I tell my group members that a need is something that is necessary for the relationship to survive and thrive. So if a need is not met for an extended period of time, then it literally can threaten the relationship and the survival of it. So that's why we have to really be intentional when we start to discuss, identify, put our Bill of Rights into place, and then make those boundaries, because we want to be certain and careful that we are addressing the things that are most important. So, how do you identify a need? Because I have so many partners say to me, I don't even know what I need, right? I just need him to tell me the truth. I just need him to just to do his recovery. I just need him to tell me everything that happened and then I'll be okay. But it's a little more than that. I want you to start to be very aware of what you're experiencing as a betrayed partner. So, for example, if you are finding that you become very angry with your partner who's got the compulsive behaviors, then that might be an indicator to you that there's an unmet need. If there is resentment, if you're feeling resentful all the time, or if you've had resentment that is built up over time, again, I would look to there being an unmet need. If you're experiencing a lot of distressing emotions, by that I mean the real deep emotions like the hurt and the disconnection and the deep fear, again, there's probably some needs that aren't being met. Another one to look for is, am I feeling insecure in this relationship? Am I not feeling grounded? I'm not feeling like I can trust. There's probably some needs that need to be verbalized and some boundaries put into place around that. And then lastly, the other thing that I see showing up is, are you having a lot of triggers? Are you seeing that your partner's doing things that trigger you? And we can even extend this to other people in your life, right? Friends, family, children. Then there's probably an unmet need. So what I've been having the women in my group do is we go through and we first of all identify, okay, what are the needs that you have? Are those needs currently being met or are they unmet? And then if they're unmet, I'm taking them through a process to really identify what that would be like. Now, once the betrayed partner identifies his or her needs, really it becomes their responsibility to make sure that those needs are verbalized, that those needs are identified, that you step into your rights and understand them, and that you then put the boundaries into place and hold to and maintain the boundaries to help provide the best chance of those needs being met. We're going to talk about that more in just a second. I start by having the women in my groups consider 4 different areas. We look at, first of all, we look at the physical. Okay, what are some of those needs that you have in that area physical? So these include things to help take care of your own body, your physical surroundings, your physical health. So an example of that might be the physical space that I need. It might be the types of self-care that I do. For example, how much sleep I need. I know personally I need at least 7 hours of sleep for me to function well the next day. And I know that I need to eat regularly to keep my blood sugar level so that I am less likely to get hangry and I am going to be more grounded. So those are needs that I have. But there's also things like touch, and there's things like just protection. What are my needs around all of that? So we typically give the women in group a list that includes some of these ideas, and we have them circle what are some of the needs you have currently that are not being met. The nice thing about this is you can actually probably go online and find a whole list of needs in these categories, and you yourself can then circle. I'd be willing to share them as well if anybody wants to reach out to me. The next area we look at is personal. So these are the needs that you have that address your feelings, your own personal growth, and what is meaningful for you. So for that, that would include things like honesty, your self-worth, your creativity, how your contribution you give to the world, the contribution that others give to you, curiosity, how you think, equality. So there's lots of, and there's even more than that. I'm just giving you a few examples. Another area we look at is relationally. These are things that you need to build a secure and stable connection with your loved ones and with others. So this might include some of your intimacy needs, your belonging needs. Respect is a big one that comes up. Affection, support, compassion. Compassion is another big one that comes up, not only for yourself, but compassion from others. What comes up lots of times in my groups is the betrayed partner sometimes feels like they're not, the addict partner doesn't have a whole lot of compassion sometimes for when they're safety seeking or when they are reacting in a way that is not as healthy as it could be. And that's when they really need compassion. And it's really easy to identify, even in those moments, I have a need for you to have compassion for me. And here's what it would look like, and to set a boundary around that. The last area I have them start with is the area of spiritual. So these are the needs that are connected to my intrinsic value, who I am, and my spiritual self. This does not mean religious. It may, but it may not, but it's more of my spirit. What intrinsically makes me up and who I am, what makes me valuable is how I like to look at it as well. So for that, some of us need inspiration. We need a sense of purpose. We have a need for hope, forgiveness, surrendering is a big one that we work on in group. So those are just some of the needs that we have as we're working on our betrayal trauma. So one of the things I like is I refer to Vicki Tidwell Palmer quite a bit when I talk about needs. I think she was the one who really came forward regarding betrayal trauma and looking at needs and then turning those needs into boundaries. And some of the questions that I love is that she says to stop and think, okay, with this need that is not being met, what are the options that are available to me for getting this need met? So are these things that I have control over, that I can meet myself? And if it's something that I don't have control over, do I either, number one, need to accept that I'm powerless over it in the moment? And number two, do I need to protect myself if I am powerless in the moment? And what does that look like? The other thing is to ask yourself then is, do I need to reach out for support and guidance from others? Do I need to create support from other people to meet those needs or to help me figure out how to meet those needs? So I cannot tell you how often I have people come in to see me or in group going, I am in so much trauma right now, or I'm in crisis right now. I can't even figure out what I need. I'm having a hard time even taking a shower today. I'm having a hard time sleeping. Their basic needs aren't being met. So we do start with that. I help support them in that. I give them some structure. I give them some accountability. I give them encouragement. I give them some ideas that they may not have thought of. So that's one way where something might be out of your control, just simply because you're in those early stages of crisis. Later on, I see that it shifts a little more from how to take care of myself and get me grounded to How can I be in relationship with somebody who's betrayed me and rebuild trust and to feel safe? And what does that look like now? Because it's got to be different than it's ever been before. So those are some of the things that you need to ask yourself regarding getting your need met. Again, can I meet my own need? And if so, what would that look like? If I can't, do I need to either surrender it? Do I need to reach out to others? Or are there some things that I need to put into place for safety? So, what I do with the women in my group is, first of all, I have them go through the categories and they circle their needs where they feel that they're not being met. And as they're going through that, I have them compare one of their unmet needs to something they can identify a need that is currently being met. And then I have them do some experiential stuff. We did a whole artwork thing on this where they had to put together some kind of art that showed here's what it feels like when my needs are not being met. And then they did a piece of art that was here's what it feels like when my needs are being met. And then I had them identify one of their needs that is currently not being met and to draw what that feels like specifically in that area regarding that need. And it was just amazing to me to see what the women in group came up with. For example, I had one who her unmet needs, it feels like she is just in a big cloud. So she drew this picture of herself just with a big cloud. Another one, hers was, I have a need to have vulnerability in my relationship with my husband. And she drew a picture of herself coming out of the water with her eyes showing, but the rest of her still underwater. And that showed her fear of kind of coming out and being completely vulnerable in relationship with her husband. And so it gave us an opportunity to talk about what would that look like, right? What would you need in that moment for you to feel safe enough to be vulnerable? Or what would that be like for you to see your partner's vulnerability? So that was a really great example. Another one just took some images from off of a search they did online, and she loves cats. And so it was really great. I think I may have shared this previously. And in this, when the need is met, it's like a cat that's being held by a human being that's asleep, and the cat's being stroked and cuddled. When her need is not being met, she looks like a wet cat that's kind of hot in a kind of a, obviously, a hissing position. And then the other thing that she put was that she has a need to be seen. And so she had a picture of a cat that was hiding under a dresser. And so when we were able to kind of spend a little bit of time talking about what does that mean? What are your needs around being seen? And a lot of it was, I want to be able to speak up, share my feelings, have them validated, have them understood, and at times have them honored in that moment. And sometimes my needs might need to be more important. My feelings might need to be more important, what I have to say. And so what that did for those women in my group is it helped them to kind of go deeper, to understand what does it feel like in my body when a need is being met versus a need that's being unmet. I have them then kind of go through and go, okay, let's measure it on a scale of 0 to 10, with intensity being 10, really high intensity, 0 being none. Where's it at? And then I have them pick a couple of unmet needs in each category. And we may not start with the one that has the most intensity. That might be a little bit too much in their recovery. We're going to find one that they feel like I can identify that this is an unmet need. This is what it's going to look like to have it met. So then I have them go through and they do, it's a writing assignment. We call it a vision assignment, like a vision board. So what they have to do is they have to take that unmet need and they have to identify on paper what the outcome is that they want. In other words, if you were to have this need met, what would it look like? What would you see? So they're basically going to write down their vision. that they have regarding that unmet need. What would my life be like? What would I see the other person doing? What would I be doing? So that it's giving them, they're really getting into it and thinking a little more about the specifics of what that need is. Then I ask them to go step back, and as they look at what that need would look like, what it would feel like, are there any steps that are involved? Is there anything that's measurable? Is there a boundary that they need to put in place around that unmet need? And so that's when we get a chance to look at things like, well, I just need trust. Okay, what does trust look like for you? So then they're sharing with me, okay, well, trust looks like that my partner tells me the truth on everything, even the little things. Even that if they decide that they're going to go to the grocery store and they end up stopping by their friend's house for just a moment to pick something up, that they don't lie about it. They tell me that that's what happened when I ask. You're right, that's what it looks like. Okay, so is that measurable? Can you measure that? Well, maybe not in that case, but in some cases, it might be I do need to sit down, and what I do need to do is put a boundary in place that says that in order to build trust with you, what I need is for you to share with me any changes that take place, maybe in where you're going, at least for now, while I'm trying to rebuild trust. If you just let me know if plans change, that would create safety for me. And when I feel safe, then I want to connect with you. Otherwise, we know the consequence is that I have to kind of step back out of the relationship until I feel safe again. So I really start to get the betrayed partners thinking about, gosh, what do I need to do? What are my next steps in this? And then we talk about, is there some type of a conversation that needs to take place around having this need met? And so I'm really getting them thinking about how I can apply my needs and moving it forward and making it something that's part of my real life. We have then taken their top 2 needs in each of their categories, and I am now having them identify what are their rights around that. So you might read about Bill of Rights, and a Bill of Rights is basically, I ask them this question: if you were to talk with somebody else and they mentioned that I have a right to this, I have a right to honesty, I have a right to not be judged for my emotions, I have a right to say no to another person regarding my physical body being touched. And by the way, these are rights my clients have come up with in group. I have a right to be human and make mistakes. So do you believe that others have that right? And all of my group members will say, yes, 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 I do. And then I'll ask him, well, if they have that right, do you believe that you have the same right? And I have discovered that in some of my groups, some of those betrayed partners have a real hard time wrapping their head around the fact that they have those same types of rights. And so we've spent some time working through that and then taking the different categories and really brainstorming, what are the rights that you have? And it's amazing for me to see the number of women in group that go, oh, I never realized that that was a right, or that's something that I could even verbalize. And so it's been really a great experience to watch everybody gain this knowledge. And now we're at this point where we're really working on boundaries and what specific boundaries now to set around that right and what that would look like. So it's been a really nice transition from one step to the next, because sometimes I have clients who come in and they go, well, I don't know what kind of boundaries to set. I don't even know where to begin other than I don't want him doing this and I don't want him doing that. And so this is a really nice way for me to kind of teach them the process of understanding what's really important and what do you need right now. Now, one question that came up in my group was, they said, well, this is so much. How do we implement this? Now we've got boundaries and we've got rights and I've got my Bill of Rights. And so what good does it do me? What do I do with all of this? So one of the things we talk about is start with one thing. Just start with the most important thing. So it goes all the way back to what I said earlier on, and that is, what are your triggers? Is there resentment? Are you having any distressing emotions? What is showing up for you that has the potential of putting you into crisis, right? Or taking you back into some of those feelings of trauma, and identify what is the need you have around that. Make sure that you really vision and write down, get specific. What does it look like if that need was being met? Right? And recognizing your rights. The reason we focus on that Bill of Rights is because when you have experienced betrayal trauma, and many women and men who've experienced betrayal trauma, they've experienced gaslighting and they've lost their intuition, their ability to trust in their intuition. And I think understanding what your right is helps you to kind of stand firm in when your intuition does start to kick back in and you're starting to really pay attention to it. If I compare it with a Bill of Right and know, yeah, that's really, my intuition is right on that. I do have a right to that, or that is reasonable. That is going to help my relationship not only survive or thrive in many, many cases. So that's why that's really important. So I'm having my clients pick one. And then what we're doing now is we're working on what are the internal boundaries, the boundaries I put in place for myself, right? So that I can help make sure this need is met. And what are the external boundaries that I'm going to place, on my my recovering partner, so that, they create safety for me. We did spend time in group talking about making sure that the boundaries we set are boundaries that are not about control, but they're always about safety. And so it makes it so different when we frame it from that perspective. And I like to use a win-win when we approach our betraying partners, with boundaries, because we all want connection. It goes back to what I said in the very beginning, that our basic need is to have connection with other human beings. And so as I set a boundary, if I can share with my partner, the reason I'm doing this is because I want to be safe. I want to move towards you. I want connection, and I believe you do too. So that's why this need and this right I have is so important to me. I love a quote I came across by Brene Brown. I'm going to end with this, and that is, she, has some really great quotes about boundaries. And she said this: when we fail to set boundaries and hold people accountable, we feel used and mistreated. This is why we sometimes attack who they are, which is far more hurtful than addressing a behavior or a choice. And I think this is the reason why we need to identify, first of all, our unmet needs, identify the right we have to have that need met, and then we've got to put that boundary into place, because then we are not attacking, right, the betraying partner. Instead, we're able to identify and address the behavior or the choice that they make and create that safety around the need that we need to have met. So that's my thoughts for today. And I hope that that's helpful. If anybody wants any more information on that, feel free to reach out to me. I'll be happy to give you some of the materials that I use to help you as you try to figure out what your needs are and how to make them your boundaries.
I love this. It is so helpful. I think two things. One, where partners say, I don't know what I need. And others are like, I need this. But there is, like when you say, I need trust. What does that mean? And an addict is going to go, I don't even know how to start with that. So I love that you were very, identify the need, identify how can I get this need met? Is it something I can do myself? Is it something that I need from someone else? If my betraying partner is not able to step into that space, do I have support in other places that, that I can get those needs met? It is why we build communities for betrayed partners, so that they can help support each other, get support, give support, and create that safety net, for each other. And I think it is, it's overwhelming to think about, I need to set boundaries. Well, how do I even do that? And so I really appreciate that you reminded us that it is about safety. I say that, what do you need boundaries for? Your safety. And it's not just physical safety, although that is important, but it's the emotion, it's all of it. What do you need, for your safety? When you started off, and it kind of caught me too with, the crisis comes and goes. And I kind of forget that, because you kind of feel like, oh, there's a crisis and then the crisis passes. But but you're right that a trigger or something that comes up brings the crisis right back, right back there. And I was thinking, somebody shared, and I won't go into the details, but it was like one of those, so they were in a department store and they saw, an inanimate object, and it was triggering to them. And so what do you need to do to help get be empowered to what work do we have to do in order to not be triggered by, I mean, it's just horrible to think, I could be walking along and anything, could be triggering. So how do we start to shift that, particular piece, and all of the different aspects, the physical, personal feelings, the things that are meaningful to us. And you, even when you were talking about, the sad or the angry or the joy, I remember the old saying, a pain shared is halved, and a joy shared is multiplied. And I thought that is so true. We need to connect with other people, because, if I'm excited about something, if I'm telling you and you get excited too, it's like, yay, but if I'm sad and somebody steps into that space and empathizes with me, like I feel heard, and I mean, it just helps with all the things that we as addicts aren't great at with connection. I love when you're talking about the art. I thought, I suspect that the art is so useful because, when it's all about the words, we can get stuck in the head, and when we have to create an art project and be creative, I remember, like with trauma eggs, you have to draw it. You can't write the words in it because it accesses a different part of the brain. And I thought, when you're doing the cloud, I mean, I had this visual, when you're sharing that, and I thought, oh, this person is disconnected and alone. I mean, that was what I picked. It was, they're alone and in a fog and can't find, the sunlight, and, and all. So I had this complete visual just based on, this person felt like they were in a cloud, and in the water, and the, trying to come out of that, and, like almost drowning. So that feeling, but also afraid to show more, it's safe to stay, there's safety, but you're almost drowning too. So, just beautiful to do the artwork. I just love how you broke it down. Like, we're going to talk about this aspect, and then we're going to, like, what do you need? And, what does trust look like? What boundaries, internal and external, do you need to set, for your safety? And even the breaking it down is, what's the most important? What's the most problematic right now? And then, you can work on that, and then, oh, okay, now that one's not quite so bad. So, then work on the next one. But I think it's so overwhelming, particularly, like you said, when you've been gaslighted, when when you can't trust yourself, or you don't feel like you can trust yourself, with things. How do you even set boundaries? Particularly also when the addict is going, your boundaries don't matter, and I'm going to do what I need to do, because you're wrong, you don't know, whatever. I just think it's so challenging. I also think using these boundaries for safety, it isn't just with your betrayed partner. I think it's really easy to overextend, not know when we need to take care of ourselves physically and go, yeah, we'll help out that friend, even though it's, like we're overloaded, overwhelmed, and we go, yeah, we can still do that, or, we say yes to, PTA or whatever it is, we overextend. So learning to set safety boundaries, healthy boundaries for ourselves across all, and maybe we start with some of those that are a little easier to, to practice on, as well. The internal, and external boundaries, it's just all, it's all pieces, and it's all layers. And the other thing is, you don't have to do it perfectly, but just taking steps. I think you start to feel, that little bit, like you talked about getting enough sleep. If I have a boundary that I'm going to go to sleep and I'm going to take care of myself, that I feel better. I show up better, like that. And it's just a little shift. If I'm eating properly, I feel better. I show up differently. All of those little things, matter. So great stuff as always. So, but I just have this, the other thing I was thinking too, because you're doing it in group, I suspect that because I was like, if I did all this art stuff on my own, I bet I wouldn't get the truest form. I mean, I would make some progress and all that, but having the input and having people, go, this is what I see. I hear you saying this, but this is what I see, or refining things a little bit. I bet it's just a beautiful thing, as part of a group. So for those of you that haven't done, groups for betrayed partners, highly recommend it. So,
Yeah,
okay, so we have,
I want
go
to
ahead.
circle back around to something really
Yeah.
quick that you said,
Yeah,
and that
please.
is, sometimes there comes a point in our group as we are working in individual therapy, is that maybe the betraying partner isn't yet in a place in their recovery where they can help to meet a need. And you're right, one of the purposes of having this community and having women in group is that they can turn to each other to help meet some needs. And I know that oftentimes as a betrayed partner, I have a need to heal, like by having my betraying partner do what they need to do so I can heal. And sometimes then that means that I really can't control my healing. I have to almost separate that. Yes, I can go to them with these needs and with the boundaries and things like that. But the reality of it is that I am responsible for having my own needs met. And sometimes that's a very difficult place to get. And it's just really beautiful to see the process when all of a sudden I recognize that the betrayed partner goes, you're right. He's not in a place where he can meet that need, but I know I can go to so-and-so, or I can turn to my group and I'm okay. So we've got to also keep that in mind, that sometimes, even though our brain wants our betraying partner to be the source of healing, they may not be in a place yet. They're in their own, recovery process. So,
Or not. I mean,
or not.
yeah, and it's not okay, for a betrayed partner to have to wait for somebody to get a clue. I mean, sometimes they do,
Yeah.
fantastic. Sometimes they don't, but for you to be in a ping pong match waiting for where which way, so leaning into what do I need, your healthy boundaries are your healthy boundaries, and that that is for your safety regardless of what an addict is doing. I think that's really important. The thing I was thinking too is, like, when somebody's really struggling, they're like, can barely get out of bed, supporting each other and going like, okay, we're going to go for a walk together at 7 a.m. We're going to talk the entire time you walk. Just get out, put your sneakers on, and we're going to go for a walk. I mean, even if you don't live in the same city, you can connect in meaningful ways and support people. And, and it helps, both people to have, that connection. So there's practical things you can do to, intervene and support people, beyond the, oh, I feel for you. Yeah, great. But you're like, okay, you're struggling to get out of bed. We're going to commit. We're going to chat, and this is going to be our time while we walk. I mean, whatever, I'm making this up, as most things I do. So I go walking a lot. So, okay. First question. How do you even begin to forgive such a personal betrayal that shows how little importance he had for me while he was pretending that I was the most important person in his life? This sounds like somebody very, very early. Oh, wait, no. And now that he's in recovery for almost 2 years, I take that back. I should have read. And now that he's in recovery for almost two years, how can I believe that he will not pretend for a few years to make sure I believe that he won't do it again in the future?
Couple of things in that particular question you have stands out to me. First of all, how can I even begin to forgive? I want you to know that that's very hard, because for you, what I'm hearing you say in the first part of your question is there was that incongruency of, he's telling me I'm the most important person in the world to me, and yet he is literally doing the one thing that is probably the most detrimental and destroying to our relationship by being in his compulsive behaviors and betraying me in that way. So the first thing I want to just focus for a moment on forgiveness, because I could do a whole segment on that, and surrendering, because there's a lot of research on forgiveness. And I know oftentimes people suggest that we as betrayed partners, we've got to get to a place of forgiveness. And I want you to understand that it is a process. It is a lifting or a letting go or a surrendering of the power that maybe those thoughts that you have about his acting out, or, the stories that we have that kind of hold us in our trauma or keep us in crisis, that eventually they begin to lift. To me, that's part of the forgiveness process. I don't have to forget what my partner's done, but what I'm going to do is, for me, forgiveness is probably not my favorite word. I like the idea of surrendering. It's just easier for me to wrap my head around, although to me it's one and the same, really, as far as the process goes. The interesting thing about addicts is that you may have well been the most important person to him, but because of the way an addict's brain is functioning, they can compartmentalize. They can keep it totally separate, which is very difficult for us as the betrayed partners to wrap our head around, because we are so deeply impacted by their acting out behaviors. We cannot separate it. It's impossible for us. It feels deeply personal. And so I want you to know that it is something that you're going to have to work on. It is something, that forgiveness, that surrendering part. And I think that in conjunction with that, though, the second part of the question is really important. That is, he's 2 years into recovery. So how can you believe that he's not pretending for a few years just to kind of hook you back in again and then repeat the process? And I really love Brene Brown's Braving acronym in her Anatomy of Trust. And for those of you that are watching, if you haven't watched it, go to her website and go to the videos and watch her Anatomy of Trust video. And she uses the acronym Braving. And so in recovery, when I'm in partnership with a recovering addict, I need to see certain things that let me know that I can trust. So I'm going to have a need around all of these. First of all, her B stands for boundaries. And so I am going to watch my partner who's in recovery. And what I'm going to notice is, what kind of boundaries does he now have? Does he have really good internal boundaries? Meaning he's put boundaries in place around his recovery for him to follow so that you stay safe, so that he knows that he can no longer be doing certain things because boundaries are around it, because they lead him into some of his acting out behaviors. So internal boundaries are really important. The external boundaries part is, what kind of boundaries is he placing on other people? Are they healthy boundaries? So I want to see that my partner is doing that. And if you see them and they're in recovery, they should be having much healthier boundaries, not only in the relationship with you, relationship with others, in their own recovery work, in their own actions and behaviors, just generally across the board. The R in the Braving acronym is reliability. So that is consistency. Am I seeing my partner now in recovery? They are consistent. They are reliable. If they say they're going to be home at 6 o'clock, they walk in the door at 6. If they're going to be later, then they call and let me know. If I've put a boundary in place with them, right, around a need that I have, and we're in agreement that this is the boundary, am I seeing them hold to that boundary, honoring my boundaries? Am I seeing them consistently go to their meetings? Am I seeing them consistently reaching out to maybe their sponsor or attending, their addiction recovery groups? All of those things are really important in every aspect of their life. The accountability, that's the A in Braving. So am I seeing my partner who is in recovery, they're taking accountability for everything they've done as far as their own actions, their own acting out, and the effects it has had on me as a partner, on other people? Are they taking accountability in every aspect of their life? Their shame's not coming up and they're not defending themselves. They're not trying to flip it back around and gaslight and put it back on me. I am seeing that they are truly changing in that area and going, yeah, you're right, I messed up. Here's what I realized I was doing. Here's what I'm going to do to be better. And then you see them do it. Again, that's reliability, working with the accountability. The next one is the vault, and the vault is what we share with each other stays with each other. And so what I feel like I can be vulnerable with you about, you hold sacred to you. And so with that might be that as you guys are working recovery, right, that there's certain things that you want to just stay between the two of you. I would see that also is when my partner's coming home from group, that my partner's not sharing things that they talked about in group. To me, that's a vault. I talk about that in my women's group all the time, right? You might even want to know as a partner about somebody else's recovery. And to me, a good sign would be my betraying partner who's in recovery would say, you know what, I really can't share that with you. That's something he's shared with me in confidence. I'm afraid I'd break his confidentiality. Okay, that's reliable, that's accountable, right? All of those just work together. The next one is integrity, right? If my partner says he's living by certain guidelines, principles, beliefs, am I consistently seeing them do that? The next one is non-judgment, right? And that's stepping out of judgment regarding myself as well as other people. So even though you may still be struggling 2 years into recovery with really understanding if you can trust that your partner does believe that you're the best thing, the most important thing in his life, right? And you have days where you doubt that, can he step out of judgment and say, it's okay, I understand why you feel that way. You know, if I were in your shoes, I'd feel the same way. Can you get to a place of empathy rather than judgment? And then the last part is the generosity, giving others the benefit of the doubt. To me, those are the things that I would look for to really know in this process, can I truly believe what my partner is telling me now? All of those things, boundaries, reliability, accountability, the vault, the integrity, the non-judgment, and the generosity. If those are in place, then I may have to set an internal boundary with myself that says, in this moment, I'm going to choose to believe my partner because I am seeing them do things that indicate to me that they are in recovery. So I may have to step out of my stories because I know the pain is deep and I know that it's your brain trying to protect you and keep you protected. However, my guess is that it also, those stories can create disconnection in your relationship. And from what you've said, I think that what you want is to know that this really is a safe and secure relationship and that you can really trust him. So it might be good for you, if you haven't already, is just sit down and say, I have a real need in this area to really believe that what you're telling me is true. And I can only go by what you tell me because we don't have the ability to get into that internal workings in the mind of the betraying partner, but I can watch what you do. And here's where I need to be seeing you, doing things consistently, reliably, to create trust for me. So that's kind of my thoughts off the top of my head.
Well, that was fabulous off the top of your head. I wonder if I gave you like more time. No, it was fantastic. I love that you shared that. And yeah, I mean, I really heard fear. And and Debbie mentioned this, what are his actions? Yes, it's having conversations, but at 2 years, if he's in recovery and not just abstinence, if you can step back and look at, have you seen progress with him over the last 2 years? Is he doing the braving things? Is he stepping into those spaces? Because that fear that's keeping you protected is keeping you also disconnected. So Eddie Caparucci's webinar on Wednesday, we just talked about, some of this and my sadness around a partner who is so afraid to, there's no guarantee. There's no guarantee that he won't go back. I mean, I've been in recovery a long time, and there is no way I would tell my spouse that I'm never, ever going to act out ever again. I can't, For today, what I'm doing is taking the action steps that I need to make sure that for today, I'm not going to do that. I'm pretty darn sure that today I won't. And I'll do the same thing tomorrow. And as long as I continue to do that and continue to learn and grow, I have made huge, huge strides in my recovery. Even, every year I continue to grow and learn, and that's fantastic. And that gives me more ability to connect in real and meaningful ways. Have I gotten burned by people? Absolutely. Has it hurt? Absolutely. I am willing to suffer those burns and hurts because the connection that I make with most people aren't going to do that. There have been a few, but most people I'm able to connect in a real and meaningful way. we're all humans. I muff up unintentionally, really unintentionally. And, I have the opportunity to step into my recovery program and make amends, real and meaningful ones, not just lip service. So it's a process, but I would invite you to work on the fear, the vulnerability, the scared, I get it, but it's keeping you distant from people you love, and probably keeping your world and your focus on his addiction, which I think sucks too. It's like, you deserve a life, and his addiction, I'm saying his, I don't know. The addict's addiction is, I don't want it to be the focus of your life forever. I hope it isn't. I don't live in thinking about my addiction all the time. My husband probably hardly ever thinks about it. Although my brain is different. And like, even at this point, like, he knows, like, when you were sharing about the brain, like, I would really encourage you, to explore what sex addiction is and isn't. Sex addiction is not about sex. The betrayal and the pain of that is so painful. And I think it is, terribly hard. I think, we know lots of people that are so betrayed financially, like, he's gambled away all of our money, and, and that's a huge betrayal too. But you're right, particularly for those that have acted out in person, the betrayal is devastating. Yeah, I really do believe that the compartmentalization, and he really does love you, and then his brain goes into that. So understanding, to a degree, you'll never really understand because you have a normal brain and we don't. But if you can learn about what addiction is, and that sex addiction isn't about sex, alcohol isn't about alcohol. I mean, it's all about how it takes us away from. It's our maladaptive coping mechanisms. It's, it works for us for a time and then it doesn't. And we hurt people deeply, ourselves included, and we lie to ourselves and everyone else. But we can learn to do it differently. And I really appreciate what Debbie was talking to about forgiveness versus surrender. And it is, for me, my finding for me for forgiveness is I do it for myself. The other person may or might, first of all, some of the people I've had to forgive don't even know that, that I've been resentful. I mean, this is a relationship and you do, but some of them don't even know about it. But to let them take up my mental energy, I have to take that back. So surrendering that I have no control over that. I can control my actions and reactions. I absolutely find that forgiveness is for me, not really the other person. So you're on a journey. Your healing is in process, leaning into resources that will help you continue to move forward. And hopefully you've seen over the 2 years that he is making progress, and that your pain is lessening, even if it's in moments and cycles, but there's some sunshine for you too. So.
Yeah, and I want to come back around to something you said, because I know she said, how can I believe he will not pretend for a few years? And I know one of the components of the recovery work that we do at Family Strategies, the program I'm a part of, our sex addiction and betrayal recovery program. And that is that with those that have the addiction, that one of the things they're really working on is understanding, like you said, those maladaptive coping mechanisms. And a lot of it's around emotions and feelings, and not knowing how to, first of all, recognize them, and then step into them, and then be verbal, open, and honest about them. And so lots of times they have turned to other things to help manage that or to cope with it, and in very destructive ways, obviously, in your relationship. And so one big component that happens with the men is they have to really learn to show up and be extremely honest. No more pretending. They have to be very authentic. That's a big component, that I have to, first of all, sit in the discomfort of my feelings and emotions, learn to identify them, right? Sometimes I have to figure out how to work through them, maybe express them. And I have to learn to say no if I really want to say no rather than saying yes. And that can be hard at times when they get to that point for the betrayed partner because they're not real good about it at first sometimes. And they don't, they say things kind of maybe bluntly, or they maybe say no and not the most eloquent of ways. But the important thing is that they are learning to show up truthfully, honestly, authentically. And I think that's another component I would look for and see, because you can see that not only in your relationship, you would be able to see that in your partner in other aspects of his life. So to me, that would be another clue and another thing that I would look for as well. And you're right, you may not ever, you may not ever get that place where you can believe he won't do it again. I tell my women I work with, I want to get you to a place that if it does happen again, then you're going to be okay. You've got the skills and the tools, you've got the community. Yes, you're going to have to experience difficult pain and difficult emotions, and it's not going to be easy, and we don't want that to happen. And the hope is that it won't. But if it does, you're going to be in an entirely different place. And I will literally hear women coming through the program all of a sudden one day say that in group, basically those same words. And they are very, very grounded. And when they get to that place, I see such a positive shift, not only in them, but I even see a positive shift within the relationship that they have with their betraying partner. So that would be the goal. Hang in there. I want you to know that your feelings are normal. If I were in your shoes, I would be feeling some of those exact same emotions, and I'd be going through those exact same struggles, because you're human and you care. And as human beings, we just want to be loved. And we want to know that when that person who's most important to us tells us that they love us, right? And that we're the number one person in their life, that it's the truth. So I hope that in your journey that you're able to find some healing in that.
Me too. I'm so glad you're here and so glad you asked the question. Please come back, and please know that on sexandrelationshiphealing.com, there's lots of support for betrayed partners and for addicts as well. And also the betrayed partner work group. We've had so many great ones for men, Sex Addiction 101, Porn Addiction 101, Out of the Doghouse. The new Inner Child with Eddie Caparucci just started this week. Fantastic attachment work. But we finally have our Prodependence work group for betrayed partners. So they're 6-week courses, live facilitated. So those, anything on Seeking Integrity is paid. They're $350. They're not, a huge cost, 90 minutes each. But anything on, I got my finger going, on sexandrelationshiphealing.com, free podcasts, drop-in groups, webinars. So please come back. So thank you, as always, Debbie. It was great to see you. Thanks, everyone. See you again on this one in 2 weeks. Join Dr. Rob live on Monday night as well. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye. Take care.